Live.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kenneth Hardcastle.
I'm Anna Karras.
And we are here to talk about The Rosie Project by Graeme Simsion. This is for the Collier County Public Library Virtual Book Club. So welcome to everybody who's interested, and thanks for joining. So, The Rosie Project. Don Tillman is a socially inept professor of genetics who has decided that it's time to find a wife. With the help of his academic study background, he devises a logical and lengthy questionnaire to find the perfect candidate. Then he meets Rosie Jarman. He easily disqualifies her from consideration, but he's happy to help her find her father, and in the process, his neat and orderly life is wildly disrupted. Eventually, he realizes that what we want and how we get it is not always logical. What did you think of this book, Anna?
I actually read this book shortly after it came out in 2013, and I reread it again this time because obviously it's been quite a few years since that. And I found it funny, I found it charming, and I enjoyed it very much. What about you?
In a refreshing contrast to a lot of what we read, there are a lot of complex layers to this book.
No.
There's some subtlety, social nuance that Don doesn't get, but that we follow. It's played for laughs, and it's not like it's inherent commentary on the nature of humanity or something. Although it has some aspects of that, which we'll get into.
Okay.
In short, it's a nice, easy read, and that's welcome, especially this year, especially this time of year, especially right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I enjoyed the book. Maybe it's not for everybody, but I guess we'll see in the reaction to the book discussion.
I think you could make that argument about any book, that it's not for everybody.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, Don was aggravating in his own way, but a lot less so than Kay from The One-Eyed Man, which you read a couple months back.
Wow. Okay.
I feel like we can make the argument that Kay knew better to an extent.
Yes, that's true.
Where Don doesn't have the capability. He learns to know better a little bit. Mm-hmm. But anyway. So, do we want to start with the questions?
Yeah. Okay, so the first one is, do Don's Asperger's conditions help him or hinder him? Does Don's having autism offer any advantages in his life?
So it does both. So it makes him good at what he does, whether it's his genetics academic study or his when he takes on bartending. It made him really good at that.
Very precise.
But it hinders him socially.
I liked the very beginning where he goes and gives a lecture on the aspects of Aspergers Syndrome, and how it was very interesting to me because he basically made a case for how good it is, how all these kids who were there were being told that this is a bad thing, and we have to learn new life skills to get beyond this. And he's saying, hey, wait a second here now. They're very hard workers, they're very precise, they're very, I can't remember all of the different things he said that were positive of having Asperger's, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, he gave us situations such as, he gave situations in which it could be advantageous to have Asperger's. And, what he thinks is advantageous and what society thinks is advantageous is sometimes at a crossroads.
Correct.
So,
yes, absolutely.
But yeah, that was an interesting setup early in the novel to see what.
And of course, he doesn't see himself at all in this.
Right.
Right.
Right. He gives a lecture on Asperger's, and he doesn't seem to think he has it at all.
Nope.
So he's undiagnosed or diagnosed as something else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question 2. Where do you fall on the spectrum between structure and chaos in life? Are you highly rigid in your routines or very relaxed? That's a little personal.
That's a fun question. I can be rigid.
So can I.
Yeah, I think anybody can be rigid when it comes to certain things, certain routines, certain things they like to see.
Yep.
But
there are other places where I'm just off the map lazy.
I'm not sure lazy comes into...
No, it's not lazy, I guess, but just more relaxed about things. Like, for instance, it's Christmas time, and we have a Christmas tree. And I like to put the tree up, the day after Thanksgiving. My husband thinks that it should go up December 23rd. So,
how'd you resolve that one?
I put it up the day after Thanksgiving.
Fair enough.
He doesn't get a say since he doesn't do the decorating, so.
Yeah, we put ours up on November 30th, but that's because my sister-in-law wanted it to happen. So,
yeah.
My wife and I usually wait, until maybe about now
right.
to start putting it up.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, but you see, that's the whole thing, Everybody has an idea of how things should be done, and you can be rigid about it or you can be relaxed, and most people are a good combination of both, I think. Okay.
So, yeah, where do you fall in between chaos and structure in your life? So let us know in the comments.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe we can have a conversation about that.
Yeah. Okay, question 3. Do you agree with Don's assessment that humans often fail to see what is close to them and obvious to others?
That's Don's specialty.
I'm smiling under this mask.
Yeah, that's Don's specialty. Throughout the book,
yes.
You see where he's gotten too close to something, or you don't. It's where he's just completely blind to what's going on around him, but he's commenting on the same thing about somebody else.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, I found that interesting. Especially, he's pointing out when he meets Rosie, and we haven't really even talked about Rosie yet.
Right. So Rosie,
yeah.
let's mention her.
Let's mention Rosie, since the book is named after her.
She is a force of nature, you
Indeed.
might say, who kind of storms into Don's life and turns it upside down, and she's not trying to do that.
No,
she's
not
at all.
No.
She's just her presence and the way he thinks about her just completely disrupts everything that he's doing. He turns his whole life around to first accommodate her, and then eventually, by the end, as it's a happy ending, you know what's going to happen. He turns his whole life around in order to be with her.
Right.
So, what do you think about her?
Well, I enjoyed her very much. I thought that she reminded me a lot of somebody I went to high school with, and I'm not going to name names because they might be watching. But she was a girl who was one of my very dear friends. She was very smart, and had no common sense whatsoever. Not that Rosie doesn't have common sense, but there was kind of like a disconnect there, a little bit. And she was a very free spirit, and I really appreciated her willingness to embrace things and her joy of spirit. That is something that I really liked about Rosie.
I really appreciated the trip to New York.
Yes.
That was the centerpiece of the book.
Yes.
They eventually, in order to try to help find her father, they take a field trip to New York. It's set in Australia, by the way, the book. Just the contrast of how they thought about how they planned the trip, in that Rosie didn't plan anything to start, and Don planned every moment of the flight, not to mention the rest of the trip.
Yes.
So she,
Yeah.
so he starts going over what they're going to be doing, and she just completely shuts him down. Says, "Okay, we're going to do some of this. We're going to do some of what you want to do, and we'll see how things go."
Right.
And also how she interrupts and he goes shopping for a scarf, accepts the first scarf that the lady gives him to give to a friend of theirs,
Mm-hmm.
and then Rosie says, "No, no, no, no. This is how we shop."
Ooh, we have a comment. I could identify with Dawn because I am a teacher of mathematics and depend on structure very much, and that's a good point.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, what is there in mathematics but structure and rules and I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, Don would appreciate that.
Yes,
Maria.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Maria, for voicing in. Let's see. So yeah, Rosie was a force of nature, like you said, and the whole idea of okay. First of all, we haven't talked about Don's questionnaire yet, which was a beautiful piece of work. I think he said it was 14 or 16 pages long or something like that, of
16,
questions for a prospective applicant for the position of Dawn's mate. And he has all sorts of questions in there, including, height, weight, and BMI, and whether or not they drink, if they wear jewelry or makeup, all sorts of stuff.
Do they care about ice cream flavors?
Yes, really personal questions that could be extremely offensive to, well, probably most people. Especially a woman who is, looking for someone who is, or I don't know, just looking for
a relationship.
A relationship, sure. Yeah, I mean, and I laughed out loud when he said he went to a singles party and he passed out the applications, and I'm like, oh, this is not going to end well. I laughed out loud at that. And by the way, I listened to this book this time around instead of reading it. I read it the first time. This time I listened to it in audiobook format, and it's done in Australian accent, and it was fabulous. So I listened to it on Hoopla. If anybody is interested, you can go ahead and check that out today if you want and listen to it. Very funny story.
I was surprised that he got as many responses
Yes,
to the questionnaires
yes,
we did.
I was too.
Which kind of speaks to, I suppose, the desperation of people who
Right.
are in the dating scene sometimes.
Of course, it is the author's prerogative that people responded to his questionnaire, but anyway. Let's talk about.
One more thing on that.
Yes.
One of the Enhance Your Book Club options at the back of the novel was make your own questionnaire for a potential mate. And considering the events of the book, I can't conjure a worse exercise. It might be fun to talk about some of the things, but everybody's list kind of simultaneously has the same qualities, mm-hmm. and also is completely different, mm-hmm. Which makes up humans.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, we both have spouses, so it's a moot point. But to think about it, there are definitely some questions that I would raise. Not that I'm saying that I want to get rid of my husband, because I don't. He's wonderful. But every relationship has sticking points that you don't agree on everything, and that is the point. So, but we haven't talked about Jean and Claudia yet. That's the next question. What do you think of Jean and Claudia's relationship? Can it work?
So, no. The answer to that question is no, that's not going to work. And I bet that's part of the topic of the next book in the series. The Rosie Effect is the second book. Is it a trilogy?
I think there might be a third one, yes.
I'm not sure.
I think, yes, there is a third one. I don't know what the name of it is. The Rosie something.
Yeah, probably the Rosie something.
Yes, probably the Rosie something.
So, I haven't looked into that book or the series at all, but I bet that the breakup of Jean and Claudia's marriage is going to be something that's happening in the next book.
It feels imminent to me.
Let's talk about that a bit.
Okay.
Jean and Claudia Uh, according to, we only have Don's perspective on it, which is flawed, no doubt. But it looks like Jean and Claudia have an open marriage, at least according to Jean.
At least according to Jean. I'm not sure
and
that...
Claudia seems to consistently be surprised by things that Don tells her about Jean's whereabouts or what Jean's doing. So, yeah, Jean is no better than just cheating on her at this point.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, yeah,
But
if you have an
do
open marriage
think-
but you don't communicate, that's a marriage that's not going to...
I do think
last
Claudia
very
has
long.
some sense of what's going on, but she chooses to ignore it.
Mhm.
That's how I felt.
That's a
reading
choice
the
you
book.
can make, for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
But it's not conducive to good communication. And that could be another example of what we mentioned earlier about humans often fail to see what's close to them and obvious to others.
Exactly.
So some of the things are obvious, maybe even to Don, or especially to Don by the end of the book.
Right.
But the issues aren't necessarily apparent to Jean and Claudia right now.
True enough. I mean, Jean has this whole experiment he's doing where he's trying to have sex with as many women from different cultures as he can. And I thought that was just crazy, a little bit.
Yeah, not
A little bit.
ideal.
Not ideal when you're married.
Not,
no.
not ideal as a,
I mean, unless your
reasonable
wife is cool
person.
with it, which, certainly could happen, but I don't think Claudia was cool with it. I'm sure Claudia didn't know about his experiment.
Right.
I'm sure that wasn't something that they talked about over dinner. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, well, we may have to, read the next book and see what's going
Yeah,
on.
I know. I do want to read the next book and find out the fate of Jean and Claudia. So, question number 5 is Don's affection for Rosie grows. He becomes aware of his instincts overriding reason. And what is the role of instinct versus reason when it comes to choosing a life partner?
Well, reason, has a fair point in that, in
Yes.
which you need to, find somebody who's compatible with you on a number of different axes. You want to live in the same place, for instance, most likely. But there's this intangible quality of instinct that is important in the selection of a life partner.
Of course. Yes, there is, there's head and heart, and there has to be a balance between two of them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think about my own personal, I was friends with my husband a year before we ever started dating, so I mean, that was the reason part, I suppose, and then the instinct came along, it kind of grew, so I don't know.
Yeah, and it grows over the course of this book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
He dismisses her immediately, doesn't think she's going to be, knows she's not a partner, but he keeps seeing her because he wants to.
and he deludes himself into thinking, well, I'm helping her with this genetics project, and that makes it okay. So, yes. Anyway,
Yeah.
what other things did you want to talk about?
Have you ever read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime
Yes.
by Mark Haddon?
I have.
So same idea of a deep dive into a socially challenged lead exposed to new circumstances.
Right.
That one's about a younger person, teenager,
Mm-hmm.
who's on the autism spectrum somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and he becomes a detective, trying to figure out why somebody killed a dog.
Oh yeah, it was what was going on with his neighbor.
Right.
Oh, Maria says, but what about opposites attract? Well, yes, that's a good point. Opposites do attract. I have a refrigerator magnet actually that says opposites attract, and then they drive each other insane. So,
so opposites attract is a part of the instinct versus reason.
yeah,
But you can make an argument that the opposites attract can be can be part of the reason. So your wife is shy and you are gregarious,
Mm-hmm.
for instance. So that can have beneficial effects for both of you.
Absolutely.
So that can so that could be logical to pick somebody who's opposite you in at least some respects. But also instinct and opposites might be attracted by instinct as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I don't know why that can't work. But there has to be that compatibility there in order for a long-term relationship to work, regardless of whether you're opposites or similars. So, but getting back to what were we talking about?
Curious Incident of the Dog in the
Curious
Nighttime.
Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. That's
this
right.
was this. So that one was interesting. This one was much happier.
Yes.
And felt a lot more comfortable with the main character in their role as an oblivious person. But that one might be interesting to read if you were interested by that aspect of this book.
Mm-hmm.
As well as the sequels.
Right, absolutely. I'm looking forward to reading the sequels.
Any other closing thoughts, Anna?
Sure. Drop that on me. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'm looking forward to talking to everybody next week during the book discussion, because I don't want to do any ending spoilers here about who Rosie's father was and all that stuff.
That's the main mystery.
Yeah,
actually,
that's the main mystery. So I'm not
no spoilers
spoiling
here.
it here, but next week we are going to talk about that definitely. Now, Kenneth is right now typing his email address in the message, comments, whatever. So email him, and you can get an invitation to our Zoom book discussion chat, which is going to happen next week, Friday at noon, the 18th. And we will discuss the book at length. And we look forward to seeing all of you there.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Thanks especially you, Maria. Thanks for being an active participant.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
And we'll see you next month.
Okay.
Next week.
Bye-bye.